Ormond Edward Burton, 1893 to 1974, was perhaps the most outstanding Methodist leader of the 20th century. No others have displayed courage under fire in quite the same biblically prophetic way. Few have been more vilified by a Methodist Conference and indeed wider society, and fewer still received honours and accolades from the same groups. He grew up in Remuera, was successful at school, and enjoyed Sunday school and Bible class at St. Luke's Presbyterian Church. He didn't seem to be much fussed by the emotional appeals of religion. Loyalty to Christ was much more important to this young man. He went on to teachers' training college as well as university, and eventually he had sole charge schools in rural areas. Ormond Burton took the teaching vocation very seriously. He was imbued with a passion for learning and wanted to pass it on. He loved the Bible and read widely in history and other fields. But by 1915, all that changed with World War I. Burton initially served with the New Zealand Field Ambulance, but in 1917 became an active combatant in Flanders. 3 times he was wounded in action, and his bravery was recognised with awards including the Military Medal and the French equivalent. Burton was asked to write a short history of the New Zealand Division while still a serving soldier, recognition of his academic ability. He also wrote the official history of the Auckland Infantry Regiment after the war. The end of the war didn't mean peace for Ormond Burton. He understood the Treaty of Versailles was a sham. As a Christian, he believed that the only antidote to war was justice for all, and the desire to follow Jesus in every situation of violence by turning the other cheek. These views were highly unpopular in New Zealand in the 1920s. Nevertheless, he had the courage to voice his pacifism. Because sworn oaths of loyalty to the Crown were required of teachers, he campaigned and won the right to have a conscience clause in the Oath of Allegiance. By the 1930s, Burton had felt a call to ministry in the Methodist Church. He was eventually stationed at Webb Street in Wellington. It was a very poor area, but Ormond and his wife now built the struggling cause up against the odds. He had a tremendous ministry along with his circuit steward Arch Barrington, who was an equally ardent pacifist. They established the Christian Pacifist Society in New Zealand, affiliated to an international body. Did Burton's dislike of religious structures enhance his pastoral work and preaching work in the circuit life? He wrote of his wartime experience with chaplains, quote, "From disunion, timidity, and lack of vision, the official representatives of religion failed even more deplorably than under civilian conditions to touch the hearts of men in the mass," unquote. Burton's proven physical, mental, and spiritual courage allowed him to capture this high moral ground. Few others could match it because he spoke with experience. Along came World War II. Inevitably, that meant open-air meetings and campaigns against recruitment, and the war effort were regarded as seditious. Burton was arrested a number of times and received progressively harsher sentences. On the first occasion, Peter Fraser, the then Deputy Prime Minister, later to be Prime Minister, visited Ormond Burton in prison. A decorated war hero preaching pacifism and stirring up anti-war sentiment was the last thing the government of the day wanted. Fraser's request met with staunch resistance, and when Burton was arrested and charged for the 4th time, Justice Blair sentenced him to 2.5 years imprisonment. The jury, which had found him guilty, had also asked Blair for clemency for the World War I hero. Blair instead chose to make an example of him. Methodist Conference, meanwhile, had adopted a resolution that seemed to walk a middle road. It required that pulpits not be used as vehicles for recruitment to war, nor enrolment in pacifism. This was intolerable to Ormond Burton's conscience. To him, it undermined the gospel call to be peacemakers. He argued the case that the church had no moral right to impose such a restriction upon pulpit preaching, and he refused to accept the discipline. Consequently, the then president, Reverend Walker, dismissed him. After a vitriolic debate and the taking of a vote, 70 to 45 are in favour of dismissal, but with more than 100 abstentions. Thus, Ormond Burton served his time in prison as a dismissed clergyman and had no contact with the Methodist Church for 12 more years. Burton found work as a teacher in 1946 and, against all the odds, rose to become the principal of Wellington Technical College by 1953. Outstanding feat. The Methodism he loved was substituted by attendance at the local Anglican parish, a most Wesleyan action in the circumstances. In 1954 he sought and was granted reinstatement to full connection in the Methodist Church and stationed at Otaki. Burton was more than just theologically literate. He was steadfastly orthodox. He was a brilliant thinker, and in some ways he chose the narrow gate in a theological sense. He regarded liberal theology as heresy. He remained absolutely committed to his position that the church, and the church alone, had the divine mandate to carry out the Christian plan for deep, broad, and universal peace. No other kind of peace work could work. Hence, he was at odds with the secular campaigns for peace, such as the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament and various United Nations initiatives. As the Christian Pacifist Society became more secular, both locally and internationally, he felt it no longer had a Christian mandate and would therefore be ineffective, and so resigned. It wasn't until well after his death in 1974 that the conference acknowledged its mishandling of Ormond Burton's life in Methodism. The record was finally set straight. Burton had been a towering prophet in New Zealand church history. There have been none like him in Methodism in this country. Despite the treatment that the 1942 conference meted out, he could write this of the church in the preface to his last book, The Ways of God to Men, quote, "This, I feel, is my last will and testament to the Methodist Church, in which I've exercised a ministry, and indeed the whole Christian church in which I've moved so freely and gladly. Practically all my life I've lived in and by and for and with the church. She's my mother, and in her I'm caught up into the very body of Christ. I may write some other things before I die, but this is what I want to say in and to the church." Burton wrote a number of books on war and soldiering, peace and pacifism, and Christian faith, but it's The Ways of God to Men that is his final word on the sweep in the history of humanity. He believed that God is pursuing us at every turn for compassion's sake, even unto the last judgment. It's written in free verse, a remarkable distillation and clarification of ideas in itself, a reduction to essentials, but never to absurdity. The clear tones of a prophet, as of old, are never that, for they're forever new and fresh. Thanks for watching, and thanks be to God for the life of Ormond Burton.